Lincoln-Goldfinch, an immigration attorney in Texas.
They're trying the Trump administration is trying to get reasons why El Salvador was not stopped. How is that going, and is any legal precedence of this happening before?
So what's happening is a showdown between the administration and the federal court system, where Judge Boasberg ordered the flights not to go, and there was a lot of back and forth about whether the flights were in the air or not, but in any event, the detainees have not been returned, and although the D.C. Court of Appeals upheld the Boasberg decision, Trump has now appealed that to the Supreme Court, and so we're in a moment of waiting to see what the ultimate order of the courts is going to be relating to deportees. It appears, though, that the Trump administration is taking the perspective that once someone is gone, they cannot be brought back, which is obviously really concerning.
Yeah, especially because some of the people that were taken on those flights found out later that they were only picked up because they had certain tattoos, or they had no charges against them.
Right. Like the Trump administration is not sharing any of their, what they would call intelligence about how they're charging these men, and so the families have been speaking out, and the majority of these men, it appears, according to the families, were not criminals, did not have criminal histories, were not gang members, and in some cases they did have tattoos, but, for example, there was one guy who had an autism tattoo with his brother's name on it in honor of his brother who is autistic. So some really shocking stuff has come out from the side of the families, including the story of a man from El Salvador who was in legal status. He had been granted protection by an immigration judge, was married, living in the United States with a U.S. citizen child, and he was deported back to El Salvador in violation of the order protecting him, and now the Trump administration has been told to bring him back, and they've said that they can't and they won't. That's right. They're saying, too bad, he's gone, and that's the end of that, and we're not going to bring him back. This guy's name is Abrego Garcia, and he was is a Salvadoran who was granted withholding of removal, was living here in the United States legally, and was picked up driving his 5-year-old on supposed suspicion of gang membership, although he has no criminal conviction or even charges. And he's gone. They sent him to El Salvador, which is exactly the place where we had ordered that he not be sent because of the danger for him living there. I mean, it's shocking. It's shocking.
And in the same vein, the Trump administration has sent the military down to the border in El Paso, where it's the least amount of people crossing the border, on this idea that it's stopping criminals from coming over to the United States. Have you seen anything going on with that, or is it just?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's no activity going on at the border, so we're sending a bunch of resources. And, really, I think what's concerning to me about all of the expenditures of military resources, including opening up military bases, like Fort Bliss, to house immigrants rather than to be battle ready, is that Trump is also engaging in, foreign diplomacy or anti-diplomacy actions that I think put us at risk of actually being in wartime, and we're utilizing we're using a lot of our military resources and bases for purposes of immigration, and convincing everyone that there is this big issue. And I think people are starting to realize, I'd like to think anyway, that people are starting to realize that this is what you say, smoke and mirrors, and that we don't actually have this big immigration crisis on our hands. So hopefully the tables of public opinion are turning slightly, but I guess that remains to be seen.
What the cases we talked about before in dealing with immigrants that are being charged here in Houston, because now the Texas legislators are trying to propose that Houston, Harris County, mandate that they let ICE into their jails.
Right. That's one of the priorities of the Texas legislature this session, is to force municipalities and counties to do immigration enforcement, essentially. And for the majority of police chiefs and leaders of these agencies, they resist that because they're inundated. They're focused on their job of public safety, and it's complicated, and it's asking a lot of them to enforce immigration. And, historically, in the system of separation of powers, localities get to make their own determination about public safety. It's not up to the feds to tell the state how to police themselves, et cetera. But I think that we potentially could see the state at least attempt to force these agreements onto municipalities. And then, like a lot of things that overstep protections of our government, there probably will be litigation and potentially like an injunction in court, or the courts could block it.
This is coming not just from the states, coming from the governor's office that's actually pushing all this.
Oh, yeah. it's no surprise. Governor Abbott is very anti-immigrant, wants to be seen as anti-immigrant, and so an action like this where, Senate Bill 4 doesn't get out of the courts, and then they'll just deputize all of the police, agents in the state of Texas to just start enforcing immigration instead.
What's the status of this? I know they were talking about it. I don't know if they had a bill to go and vote on that, but they were talking about using bounty hunters as law enforcement. How has that gone? Or had they stopped talking about that?
You know how it goes in the Texas legislature. Just a slew of bills get filed, and then the vast majority of them die through the process. So that's not one that I've heard is surviving. But it's, where are we? Early April. So the next 2 months will be really critical time in the legislature, and we'll see what makes it all the way through.
What other type of draconian laws are they talking about passing? You heard of?
What's interesting about the legislature in Texas is that they've sort of lightened up a little bit on the immigration stuff because the feds are so heavily focused on immigration, so it is less of a priority. My understanding, I'm not a state legislative expert, but I've paid attention, is that the big ones, on immigration are the enforcement, the forced cooperative agreements, and then the school vouchers is the other big one.
What are they doing? We were talking about this long ago, how people are being affected by that, the immigration aspect of things. They invaded a whole town, out in Channelview in my area. They said that a whole slew of people were immigrants, illegal immigrants, and they were trying to deport people. And out of that number of people that they picked up, I don't think very few had any type of criminal record. And they're doing these vast raids across the state.
I think that they are doing fewer raids than are being rumored. There aren't really these widespread raids going on, but the things that are occurring get reported on heavily. So as far as I can tell, they're still doing mostly targeted enforcement actions with collateral arrest. So they're looking for people who are already on their list for one reason or another. They've already been ordered deported, or they have a criminal history. And then ICE will go and look for those people wherever they are. They'll go to their place of work, or they'll go to their church, or they'll even maybe go to a school. But they're looking for a specific individual or group of individuals, and then whoever is around can get wrapped up in those arrests, as opposed to just these sort of like scattershot, we're going to raid this church because we know there's immigrants there. We're not at that level yet, but that could certainly change any moment. That's the biggest thing, is that this stuff is changing on a daily basis, especially with all of the lawsuits filed and the federal orders and all of that. So it's hard to keep up, and I think people who are interested should really just try and, I have a lot of social media. They can follow me, follow people that you trust, because if you're looking at a TikTok video from last month, it's probably already out of date and wrong.
Well, yeah, and the people that I thought that churches and schools were off limits to ICE official.
Not
ICE
anymore.
agents.
Yeah,
Not
that
anymore.
changed on January 20th. There are no sensitive location protections anymore. So hospitals, schools, churches, domestic violence shelters, they're all fair game for ICE enforcement actions now. Really the only place that's safe is the embassies and the consulates from other countries in the United States. ICE can't go there. Other than that, they can pretty much go where they want.
Has that happened at some point that people have gone to embassies to try to stay out of the hairs of ICE?
I don't think that people go there to hide or get away from enforcement, but I do think that they are hosting more events and clinics and workshops there, like gatherings where people can go and do a Know Your Rights presentation, and they know that ICE isn't going to raid the Mexican consulate. So there's more of that kind of stuff and less of people like running in there for shelter.
All right. Okay, I'll leave it right there. How dangerous is it for people to get picked up just for having a tattoo?
I think it's most dangerous. The tattoo issue is most dangerous for young men from Venezuela and El Salvador because those are the two countries that have these big gangs, the Tren de Aragua in Venezuela and the Mara Salvatrucha or the MS-13 in El Salvador. Both are big gangs that have some activity in the United States. And I think it's greatly exaggerated by the Trump administration, but they really want everyone to think that there's just a ton of young, dangerous men who are parts of these gangs, and they're going to go out and get them. So they're just being really loud and aggressive about going after men from those locations, and they don't care. They don't seem to care if they make mistakes or what they would call a clerical error and pick up someone who has a tattoo who has no gang membership. So I do think tattoos are something to be thoughtful about for sure for immigrants right now.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that the MS-13 is still not really a big gang in the United States, and the Venezuelan gang is not even it's still a blurb on as far as gangs in the United States, but they're making it like this is the biggest. The MS-13 was the boogeyman 4 or 5 years ago, and now it's the Venezuelan gang. That's what I'm seeing now.
Yeah, I mean, again, I like the word that you're using. I think that's an accurate word, the boogeyman. It's like real clear. It's crystal clear that they want us to be afraid of Venezuelan gang members and Salvadoran gang members, and they want us to think that there's this huge danger because when people are afraid, they support and all of the things that they go and do. And so I think really critical thinking, accurate information, investigating things that we hear is just the way to really go about life right now for people who are trying to stay, informed.
How hard is it? Because it seems like now the Trump administration can just ignore it. Like they're having as a policy, it seems like they can just ignore what even court orders are being said against them, and putting it against the judge that makes those court orders, saying that they're against the United States, and demonizing the judges. And that is,
I think, one of the scariest things that's happening right now is that we're witnessing the Trump administration disregard federal court orders, and because that is the beginning of the end of our government, of our systems of checks and balances. If the person who runs the army decides they don't care what the courts say to them, then we have a dictatorship. That's what we have. So it's pretty scary, and I think that's why right now everybody's pretty on edge watching, okay, what's the Supreme Court going to say about this Venezuelan deportation case, and then how's the Trump administration going to respond, and are we going to start to see them just disregarding court orders? And we don't really have a precedent for that in our nation's history. This would be a first, and so unfamiliar territory for sure.
That was Kathy Lincoln-Goldfinch, immigration lawyer in Texas. If you want to reach her, you can send her an email, kate@lincolngoldfinch.com.